going to talk about rolling and inking and printing our linoleum. So I have just finished carving the areas that I want to print. So the first thing you want to do is to make sure you're going to be happy with your print by doing a proof. And all that really is a crayon rubbing. So you're going to get a rough idea of what the print will look like after it is inked up. So I'm just rubbing this with the side of the crayon. And I just want to check and make sure I can see all the details. Now some of this is because it's a crayon and not the brayer, but you get the general idea of what the print will look like. There are some areas in here that are showing up, and if you're concerned about that, you can just take your tool at this point and just carve this away. And you can also see this has been printed before and they are dark. So that gives you an indication that it also got some inked areas that you may not want. So I'm just going to take a moment and carve those areas out. It's much easier to do it now than having to wash your linoleum off and then carve. So I'll just get those areas out as quickly as I can. And now I should be all set to go. If you are carving, you want to make sure that you get rid of these linoleum pieces. They can actually gunk up your ink and it will cause white spots. So you would just brush these into a pile, pick them up, slide them off the table and get them into the garbage. So now I have my linoleum, I'm ready to print. I need to get my papers that I'm going to be printing on. In this case, I'm going to just do white. It's important that you put your name on them before you print. Probably your class code would be a good idea. And you might want to number it so that you know which one you did first. When there are professional printers, they actually addition the prints by keeping track of which one's first and second. And the lower ones are actually worth more. So something to keep in mind. And this will be my number 3 print, okay? So I have newspaper down. Then I'm going to grab the materials I need. I will need, of course, my linoleum. I'm using plexiglass to roll the ink out on my ink. I'm using a palette knife to get the ink out of the container. And this is the brayer, also known as a roller. You're going to take the ink out of the container. Generally the ink stays in one spot. You go get the ink and then you put it on your spot and then you go someplace else to work. You're going to put like a glop of it or a dollop of the ink. You don't need a whole lot. To start, you can always go back and get more. When you begin to roll out your ink, the first thing you're going to do is just kind of dab it. You're not going to use all the ink right away. You start by rolling out the ink. And I'm stopping here because I want you to see this texture. You see the lines in that ink? That is telling you it's too much ink. If I put this on my linoleum right now, the ink would go in the smaller parts where I probably don't want it. So, and plus my brayer is not full of ink. So I want to continue rolling. And I'm going to go in different directions. I'm going to pick up the brayer, go back and forth, and basically I'm making a square. It doesn't have to cover the whole thing. The smaller the square, the easier the cleanup. Something to keep in mind. When you are rolling out your ink, you want to look and listen. You should hear the sound as the brayer is rolling, kind of tears the ink. And then as you look at the ink itself, you should see a small texture, kind of like an orange peel. When you see that and hear it, then you are ready to ink. So then I'm going to take my linoleum and I'm going to roll it, take the brayer and roll it just one way. You can see already with one roll where the ink is sticking out. The problem with going back and forth is if there is more ink on the linoleum than there is on the brayer, it will actually take the ink off. So then I'm going to reapply the ink. I'm still hearing that sound, seeing the texture. And you want to make sure you go from one edge to the other. And if you listen carefully, you can kind of hear it tearing on the linoleum. So now it looks like I can even see a little bit of a texture on the ink itself. So now I'm ready to put the paper on it. I'm going to take my first one. It says number 1 with a circle, and I'm just going to set it on top. And then I want to make sure I hold the paper as I rub, and I just use the side of my hand to rub. As you rub, you can kind of see the ink coming through already. Kind of get a ghost print, they call it, where you can see what's happening. Now before you tear it off completely, you want to peek. One thing I noticed right here, this should be black, but it's white. So I want to go back to that area and rub a little bit harder. Now it is solid black. I want to check all of the areas before I pull it off. How easy do you feel it would be to line this back up? Practically impossible. So you want to get it right before you take it off completely. Check all the corners, check the black areas. When you are happy, then you can take it off. And that's a pretty good quality print. Now if I were to do another one, it's important that you re-ink this, and I'm probably going to have to re-ink this. As I listen to this, do you hear how much quieter it is? Okay, and if you look at the texture, it's much smaller, so I need to add more ink. Roll it out, get rid of those lines. Look for the orange peel texture. This is the ink I'm looking for, and then I'm ready to reapply. You will find that the second and third time you ink, you don't generally have to put on quite as much ink as you do the first time because you have kind of a base already. Let's see how quickly. I just did it 2 quick times. Again, rubbing, holding the paper, making sure I'm not wiggling it or moving it because you can get a double image if you're not careful. Okay, a few little white areas. Go back to those areas, press them down a little bit more. Let's do a little bit over here. Making sure it's good. And there you have print number 2. So you will continue until you have as many prints as you are asked to make.